Hi, I'm Gail Bannock.
And I'm Alana Santone. Welcome to the She Means Business podcast. Throughout our careers, we faced countless questions and sought advice from other women we respect and admire. And that's exactly what this show is about.
Each week, we aim to help you achieve your goals by sharing our experiences and talking with successful leaders, offering real stories, practical advice, and actionable takeaways for women who mean business. All right, let's do this.
Welcome, everyone, to the She Means Business podcast this week. I am so excited to welcome Kristin Shane to the show. Gail and I first met Kristin at Target Canada when we all worked together. I was extremely fortunate to be Kristin's business partner for a year, and during that time, I learned a lot from her. Kristin is a seasoned retail executive with stints as the chief merchant at PetSmart, and she spent 11 years at Target, including a couple of years at Target Canada. She's also owned her own business, and she has won awards, sits on boards, and is a wife and mom to 3 teenage kids. So welcome to the show, Kristin. So great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It's like a reunion.
It really is. I'm getting flashbacks to our times together. So I just introduced a little bit about your story, but obviously there's so much more. You've had such interesting experiences. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you knit all your experiences together into the thing that is your career journey.
Thank you. Well, it's been a journey for sure. I would just, if I took us back to when I started. I gave this presentation at the National Retail Federation earlier this year to college seniors who are getting ready to sort of launch their career. And what I said to them is, at the time I was the chief merchandising officer at PetSmart, and these are all young adults getting ready to start their career in retail. And I just said, look, you look at me as the chief merchant, and this is probably a goal of yours. But the first 8 years of my career, I spent figuring out all of the things that I didn't want to do before I figured out what I did want to do. It was a lot of seemingly divergent opportunities that allowed me to converge in retail. So, after undergrad, I was in consulting at Accenture. I learned so much. And when you're in consulting, you're put in front of people well ahead of, your time when you probably should. You learn how to communicate and build decks and strategies and all of that. So I was at Accenture for 4 years. From there, I went to El Salvador and I spent 2 years in the Peace Corps. So I literally went from a massive consulting firm to working in the small villages of Central America with these sort of women co-op groups that made these artisanal goods and helped them figure out how to bring these goods to market. And that was sort of the spark of, I think retail could be really interesting. I went back to business school and I actually wrote a business plan that had bringing these women's artisanal goods to retail. And, one of the mentors in my life is my dad. He's an entrepreneur. And he was like, this is a great business plan, but you've never run a retail business. So why don't you go figure out how to run a retail business and then maybe you can launch this. And so when I was in business school, which by the way, while I was there, I met my husband, Target came to recruit. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm just going to go work at Target for a couple of years, figure out how to run a retail business, and then I'm going to launch my own business. And when I got to Target, my first job was a seasonal candy buyer. I bought Halloween candy. And I tell you, it was like love it. I fell head over heels in love with retail. I loved it because I was like, I am the CEO of Halloween candy at Target. I mean, you just learn so much, and retail is a team sport, as you know. And I was so in over my head, but I loved every minute of it. And I love just figuring out innovative ways to get the consumer excited. And so I was in 9 jobs in 11 years at Target. I left in 2016 to, I never did the thing where I started my own retail business. And it had been something I'd always wanted to do. So I left in 2016 and I did 2 entrepreneurial ventures. One is I launched a boutique fitness studio in the Twin Cities called Flyfeet Running. And then I also spent that time doing a lot of consulting for small brands who wanted to go to retail. And it's interesting because I launched Flyfeet in 2016. And in 2019, I got a phone call to go be the chief merchandising officer at PetSmart. I was not looking for a job. I sort of took the call on a whim. And as I was listening to the opportunity, I was like, gosh, I really miss retail. I love this entrepreneurial thing, but I can do both, because when you run a boutique fitness studio, we were going to have hundreds of locations across the US, and I can't be in the middle of it. We had an awesome team. And so Ben and I made the decision to move to Scottsdale. So I was the chief merchandising officer at PetSmart for 5 years. And what a fortuitous decision, because we moved here in August of 2019. And obviously in March of 2020, COVID was really hard on the fitness business. So we sort of limped along through 2020, but we ended up closing at the end of 2020. That was really, really hard to go through. You put your blood, sweat, tears into something that you have to close. That was really hard. So anyway, I was the chief merchandising officer at PetSmart until earlier this year. And I left PetSmart to go be the chief merchandising and marketing officer at Guitar Center. And I was there from February until about a month ago. So that's my career journey.
And you came there from spending 10 years at Target US or 9 years at Target US. I'm curious, what did the experience at Target Canada teach you? Because it was obviously so much different than the experience you would have had in the US over the first kind of decade of your career there.
I think the biggest thing is when you are in a corporate job like one at Target, Target is, as we sit here today, well over $100 billion retailer. I mean, huge. Your opportunity to figure your way through adversity it's not available to you. And Target Canada, adversity was abundant. It was everywhere we looked. I mean,
we couldn't find places where adversity wasn't.
Didn't have inventory, but we had adversity.
We had lots of adversity. And I remember one of the leaders there, when we were in the thick of it and it wasn't going very well, he sort of flippantly said, don't waste a good crisis. And I was like, easy for you to say, but honestly, we figured our way through a lot of things that never in my wildest dreams did I think we would have to solve. But I would tell you, the thing that helped me the most is I just found myself constantly trying to reframe what success looked like for the team, because it was clear as we got into it that, frankly, winning wasn't an option. But what's also not an option for me is showing up and not having fun. We had a lot, in a weird way.
The most.
Right, guys? I mean, we
fun.
had so much fun. And we had fun because we made a choice. We made a choice to show up for each other and for the team, to reframe what success looked like, to celebrate the small wins.
And so, okay, so how did you get your team through it? Because I wasn't even in the two of you, Alana and Kristin, you were at the heart of it. You were in merchandising. Yeah. I was peripheral, but you guys were at the heart of where it hurt the most. How did you get your team through it when everything is just somber and in the red and, miserable, and it's hard to keep everybody happy?
I mean, Alana and I would sit in forecast meetings and we were doing half our forecast. I mean, it was not, we were somber. Nowhere near, it was not good.
Yeah.
And so, look, we still needed everybody to show up every day and do their best to try and figure out a way forward. And so I think as I looked around, we saw leaders who let the enormity of the problem get the best of them. And so, like all things in life, I think what Alana and I tried to do is just say, what's in front of us? What can we control? And let's just take off bite-sized pieces and frame it for the team and find a way forward. It wasn't magic. It's not like a secret sauce. It's just, what can we do? How do we get the team excited? Because look, like as humans, momentum fuels us.
Yeah.
And we need some kind of like positive reinforcement. And that I'm not saying like, Rome was burning and we're like, oh, everything's fine. No, like we were very clear on the enormity of the problem.
At some point when everything was on fire and you had come into this from a very calm, loving place of, Target US, were you like, and you had all your eggs in because both you and your husband both came.
Correct. And we had a baby in Canada. Let me be clear.
Exactly. And did you come pregnant or
Yes.
Yes.
I
Okay.
came
So
pregnant.
like, how crazy is that? Were you like, oh my God, what did we do? Or were you too busy to even were you freaking out?
I was never like, oh my God, what did we do? I was never like that. Honestly, it was so hard. I mean, it was such an awesome opportunity and the people there were amazing. And yeah, like it was hard, but like, I don't know, in my career, the things that are the hardest are the ones that are the most rewarding. And so I just chose to not let the enormity of all of it get the best of us. And I think that was a decision that Ben and I made together because to your point, yes, we moved our whole family there, but Ben was also working at Target Canada. Talk about all in. We were all in.
Yeah.
So I was never, and that has never been something people have asked me, is that a regret? Because I raised my hand for that job. I asked to move to Canada. And I don't regret that at all. It has been such a fundamental leadership learning for me that I've carried with me.
So how can it be a regret more than anything that it's just fueled you to be the leader you are as you go forward?
So I'm sure it didn't go down like this, but in my memory of your career, I remember seeing an Instagram post of you and your running shoes or you running in Paris on a work trip in the morning, which was already just very impressive. I'm always impressed with people doing exercise, but especially on vacation or traveling. And so I remember that post. And then the next thing I saw was you were launching a gym and a really cool one at that with really good content. And it was just beautiful and young and interesting. And so I'm sure it didn't happen from one day to the next. So obviously you were inspired to start your own business from an early age, but what made you decide that was the right time? Because it's a big deal to leave corporate America and get into entrepreneurship. So tell us a little bit about what made you know that was the time.
I feel like most of my decisions through my career have been a combination of, I do like a lot of research and I try and be really thoughtful and sort of a little bit data driven and like, okay, what's my next move? But then I push all of it aside and I make decisions with my heart. Like I make decisions instinctually after I've done all of that work. I'm not just like, oh, I feel like this. I put the work in, but at the end of the day, I am sort of like, what is calling me to do? And so I had always had that thing nagging in the back of my head that I felt I wanted to create something. And I've always wanted to start my own business. I watched my dad do it when I was young in elementary school. And, through the eyes of a kid, I was like, okay, so you sit at the kitchen table with your legal pad and your, calculator with the tape and you work really hard and like, ta-da, you create your own business. And he happened to be really successful. And so to me, I was like, okay, so that's what you do. Obviously, it's not quite that easy. So I made the decision. I came back from Target Canada. I had the opportunity to lead the beauty business at Target, which was an absolutely incredible job. I loved that job. Personally, like super excited about all of the brands and the consumer. And I loved that job, but I knew that I wanted to go do something on my own. And so I spent probably the better part of a year thinking about and putting plans in place for, okay, so what would it look like? I've always personally been very passionate about fitness, and I'm passionate about fitness not just because, you know, it's part of what makes us healthy, but there's such an important part for women psychologically for us to make time for ourselves. You know, you saw that post of me running in Paris on a work trip. Like that, for me, running is not for vanity. It is like my mental health. It is my time. And I wanted to create something. You know, the fitness industry is full of a lot of gimmicks. You know, Flyfeet was not gimmicky. It was rooted in science. All of the programming was written by an exercise scientist who used to be a former professional athlete. It was hard. It was hard, but it was always you against you. So the format of the class was, Gail, how fast can you run for 2 minutes? Alana, how fast can you run for 2 minutes? Not like, okay, everybody set your treadmill at this speed. And so every class that you walked in, it was you versus you. And that was important to me because just like we talked about in Target Canada, I really believe that when we prove to ourselves, whether it's a 2-minute running effort or overcoming a massive corporate debacle, when we prove to ourselves over and over again with some kind of consistency that if we show up as our authentic self and we are true to ourselves and the people we love, we can do hard things and we'll find our way to the other side one way or another. It might not be pretty. It might not be easy. It might not be scripted, but we can do that. And so for me, fitness was the vehicle, but that is the sort of bigger idea. So practically speaking, I was like, you know, at the time, I think I was 40 and I had 3 kids. And I was like, it's sort of now or never. Like these kids need at some point to go to university, as you guys say, as college as we say in the US. Like these kids need to go to college. I got to pay for it. So like it's now or never. We're going to just go full send. Ben was supportive. And so in 2016, I left and launched Flyfeet. Long answer, but there you go.
No, that's great.
Yes.
I want to pivot a little bit to mentorship, because I think you had mentioned that when you went to PetSmart, you had gotten a call from someone in your network, I think a mentor, from what I remember, you can confirm. And I would love to just explore this idea of, you know, how mentors have played a role in your life and where it's taken you, and how you've kind of identified or leveraged mentors. And you know, I think, you know, sponsorship is something that's really important in that as well. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I love this topic, particularly as a female executive, because I think it's really hard for us to figure it out. And I don't have it all figured out, but here's what I would tell you. I have not a ton, but I have a few mentors in my life that have been totally pivotal in my career. And yes, my biggest mentor, my lifelong mentor, she hired me at Target. She hired me at PetSmart. I still talk to her to this day, almost every day. I would say a couple of things. Number one is it has to be a give and take relationship. It can't just be she is serving me. I also have to figure out how to add value and serve her. And that's looked different through the course of the 20 years we've known each other. And honestly, sometimes it's just appreciation. People just want to feel appreciated. And if I asked you guys, would you spend time with a female executive who I told you was high potential and wanted a mentor? I don't even have to ask you. I know you would say yes without even hesitating. I know you would. So give and take is important. But the second piece is I own it. Like I made the calls. I asked for help, but I did it in a way where I was really specific. And I would say more often than not, women come to me and they want mentorship, but they're not willing to like sort of go at it and put the hard stuff on the table. So make it a two-way street, be specific and like really lean in. And then the last piece is like, it doesn't always have to be where you help them or they help you. Just stay in touch with people. Like a text like, hey, I thought about you today when I saw this. I just wanted to check in and I hope you're doing okay. Like, and it's okay if a year has gone by or 2 years. Like, I don't know, Lana, when was the last time we talked? It's been years. And you sent me one text and we got on the phone immediately. Like, that's just how we work. And so I just want women to sort of stop feeling weird or some kind of way about mentorship or sponsorship and just ask, because I think you'll be shocked at the response.
First of all, I think what you're saying, the notion of having some accountability in that, like as someone who is seeking a mentor, you actually have an accountability to bring something to that relationship, whether that's organization, you know, what you need to get out of it, appreciation. So I think that's really important. On the other side, being a mentor, because you're a mentor to so many. I mean, I watched it live. How do you bring yourself to that relationship? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people starting out who are trying to mentor people and they're kind of trying to figure that part out as well.
There are a lot of ways to be a mentor, and there's no one right answer. I think the best way is to meet the person where they're at, which means you got to spend a little bit of time getting to know them, building that relationship. And then I mean, you guys know me, I'm pretty direct. I go right at it. I'm like, what do you want out of this? Like, how can I help? And I typically end up getting pretty vulnerable with them first so that they can see that I'm willing to do it. So I will talk to them about, you know, the time I interviewed for the job that I was dying to have and then I didn't get it. You know, the time when I failed at something, the time when I had to leave a job because I didn't feel like it was the right fit for me. Like, I put myself out there in a way that maybe is a little bit surprising to them, because I want them to know that that's what this is about. Like, you don't need me to like tell you how great you are and we all feel good and you leave. Like, you need someone that's a safe space where we can have the hard conversations behind closed doors, where there's trust and confidentiality, and that we can really dig in.
What would you say to somebody who, you know, sees somebody like you and they're young, they're junior, they so desperately want to be successful and have a mentor, and to your point, you know, they want to show up with something, they just genuinely don't know. They don't know what to ask for. They don't know what to talk about. They want to get a job. They want to get promoted. They don't even know what they want though. So how, I know I'm swinging the pendulum back to the mentee to try to help people, because even I feel like I've experienced this firsthand. I remember seeing a woman present at a conference or something. She was so amazing. I got the courage to talk to her and I asked her if I could follow up with her. She said yes. And I'm pretty sure I ghosted her because I was like, I don't know what to ask her. I don't want anything from her, I guess was my problem at the time. I was like, I don't know what she can do for me. I don't want a job at the company that she was working at. I just want to learn from her. I just want to be near her. I want to be like her, were the feelings that I had, but I didn't know how to then articulate that in a way that didn't sound stupid. And so I just kind of chickened out and never called her. And so I can't be the only one. So like, how do you kick it off if you don't have something specific to ask for or a problem that you need to solve? Or do you just need to find a problem?
No, I don't think so. And as you were talking, I was like, you should just say that.
Okay. Right.
I mean,
I don't know why I'm here, but I want to be like you.
I mean, look, so here's the truth. I think working remote is really, really hard for young executives to reach their career goals, because in my experience, I became the leader that I am today because I got to watch killer female executives and male executives in big meetings, kill it in a presentation, or on the fly problem solving, or on the fly coaching, or one-on-one moments that got a little bit tricky, and I got to watch them navigate. Like, so much of our development is frankly just us watching other leaders do it.
Yeah.
And so what you felt, Gail, in that moment was real. Like, you were like, I'm totally inspired by this woman. I don't necessarily want to work at her company or want anything from her, but like, she is speaking to me. And so if I were you, or I were that woman, and you said to me, you were totally inspiring to me, I just want to hear your story in a different way, or I just want to understand sort of how you got there. Here's what I'm doing. I would take that coffee in a heartbeat. And then you just show up and say exactly that. You inspired me in a way that I haven't been inspired in a long time. I mean, flattery is the fastest way to a person's heart, but it's true. It's authentic. That's how you felt. And then if you show up authentically like that, because that is true and that's how you felt and you're not seeking anything from her, I guarantee you magic will happen. You guys will have a real authentic conversation. You'll connect in a different way. And who knows where it leads, but it's okay. Like, I think, I don't know how long ago that was, but you should email
It was
her
a
and
pretty
be like,
long time
I
ago.
still think about you.
And to be clear, I got the coffee. I just didn't go on it. She did agree to have coffee with me, but it was a long time ago. I'm embarrassed to follow up with her, but maybe I should.
As long as you show up as yourself, though, and you're authentic, like, it's never time wasted.
Great advice.
So, Kristin, you've made a lot of pivots in your career. And I guess pivots can apply to many different things. They can apply to taking different jobs, moving to different countries, moving to different states, moving to starting your own business. Give us a sense of how you make choices. I think you said there's the head and the heart, but the heart eventually kind of is the end. I always call it my gut. Like, the decision can feel all right. And then in your gut, you're like, just doesn't feel right. Or it might not read 100% right, but your head, you're like, yeah, I can do this. My heart, I know I can do it. What's your evaluation criteria as you think about these things? And like the next opportunity that comes your way, how do you evaluate that?
Yeah. I think my answer now is a little bit different than it was maybe 10, 15 years ago. I think today I would say there's sort of three things that I look for. First and foremost, I want to work with people that share my values, which means I believe in people first. I spend a lot of time and I invest in the team. I get to know them personally so I can have empathy and just build a really good relationship with them. I think that's really important for what we all have to do as it relates to deliver the business. Like, if you have a good relationship and a trusting relationship with your team, you are more likely to be successful. And if the company doesn't share my values, then it's not for me. The second thing is I like to do things that have big impact. And that could be, retail right now is really challenged. And I feel like every retailer is going through some version of a transformation. I love that because it gives you license to be really creative, to make bold moves, to do things that, we've never done before. And so I'm more excited to do something like a transformation or start something from nothing or launch something that's never been launched before. That kind of work really, really excites me. The third thing that was probably way more important to me earlier in my career, I believe it will fall into place, which is, what are my aspirational career goals? When I joined Target as a seasonal candy buyer, I was like, if I can make it to senior buyer, I will have made it. I mean, that was as big of a goal as I could put out there for myself. And so there is no chance I was like, oh yeah, one day I'll be a chief merchant. Not even like, no chance I ever thought that. And so the first 10 years of my retail career, I was literally like, if I could just get to the next job and the next job and the next job. I was not like thinking, oh, I'm going to make it to a C-level job ever. Now I'm like, yeah, maybe I would take the next step to the next level, but I'm not starting my career path that way. Because I think if I can build great teams where people feel supported and excited, and I love to have fun at work, that's a choice. And we can have impact, like the rest of the career stuff will fall into place.
Well, first of all, I love the 3, because I think what that articulates is you've really given it thought in terms of like what's important. And I think that's something that most of us need to do, but a lot of us don't, right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't have those 3, then how are you evaluating the next thing? And how are you interviewing the place you're going to say, is this a fit for me? Because you're almost molding yourself to what they are instead of saying, this is what I am. Do we fit together?
Right.
So I love that. Your first one on values, and this is something you and I over the years have talked about, because what struck me when I first met you and still holds true today is, I call it like you lead from a strong core. Like, you know who you are, you know what you value, you know what your values are, and you know what you stand for. And so I guess the question I have is, how did you get to that? Was it always just obvious, or what was the path to really kind of ground yourself on, like, this is what is core to me. This is who I am. This is how I lead. Because you have, of all the people I've met in my career, you're really like at the top in terms of the person who just leads from who they are.
Oh, well, thank you. That means a lot to me coming from you. So thank you.
I mean it from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, well, thank you. That's a huge compliment. I would tell you that it has not always been clear. So again, I was just like, if I can get to the next job, if I can get to the next job, if I can get to the next job. Okay. So when I made it to senior buyer, I kept getting all of this. Okay. You guys know me. So here's the read on Kristin Shane. She's got a ton of energy. She's very passionate. She's results oriented. She's super direct. She's a hard charger. She calls a spade a spade. And so to some people who don't know me, that looks really intimidating. Big personality, super direct. I also, what you don't know about me, if you don't know me, that you guys both know about me, I love with my whole heart. I mean, I am incredibly passionate and I love people, and I really am people first. But when I was a senior buyer, I kept getting this feedback that, like, I'm too direct and my personality's too big. And you're putting people on their heels because you're too direct and you sort of suck the air out of the room. And I was like, my God, that's not what I'm trying to do. Like, that's not who I am. I think I was trying too hard. I don't know, but I found myself in a really bad place. I was like, I'm bad at this. I can't be a leader. Like, as a senior buyer, you're like leading. It was like the first time I was like leading a team. And I just was like lost. And I hired an executive coach with my own money. And she would, like, you sit down with the executive coach and she's like way more money than I had any business spending at the time. But I was just kind of a wreck. And she was like, okay, what are we doing? And I couldn't even articulate. I was like, I don't know. I'm just kind of lost. I'm getting all this feedback that I sound like an absolute jerk to work with. That's not who I want to be. That's not who I am. And she just goes, well, why don't we figure out who you are? And I was like, that sounds great.
My God.
And we just started that work. Yeah, we started that work. Like, unbridled, like, who are you? And I just started really getting clear about the kind of person I was, and not the kind of leader I was, but the kind of person that I was. And we all kind of know, but when we show up to our jobs, sometimes we feel like we need to be some kind of different way. And the magic that I experienced with her is that you don't actually have to be different. So, like, the Kristin Shane that, like, goes and plays pickleball or goes on a run with you or whatever is the same Kristin Shane that shows up in the board meeting. She's not different at all. And so that just took time. And what I learned is it doesn't come, it's not without sacrifice, because I am not for everybody, and that is okay.
Is what you learned from that experience that did you learn who you were and then now you're okay with it? Or did you actually change, say, okay, I need to be a little softer, a little this, a little that? No, you just were like,
I learned who I was, and it became very clear to me when I was trying to be someone that I wasn't. And so I just had to clean that part up. Like, yes, I'm direct, but I never want to make someone feel bad. And so you can do both.
Yep.
Right? It just takes maybe a few more seconds of framing, vulnerability, connection. I believe in you. I trust you, but I don't think your number is right. You know what I mean? It takes just a couple extra seconds to like connect and put people at ease, and then deliver something that maybe if you didn't do that would just feel like a total blow. And so I think that was the journey. And it's like, you sort of never stop doing that, because I'm not the same person today that I was 20 years ago, but it's always like this self-discovery, I guess.
I love it.
So Kristin, one of the questions that we like to ask all of our guests, and I cannot wait for your advice, and I know you have a daughter, so it's all very relevant, but what advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know now with all of your adventures and pivots and successes and failures and lessons? What advice would you give your younger self?
This is the easiest question. The advice I would give my younger self would be twofold. One, bet on yourself. And that is advice that was given to me when I was at Target. So when I was getting ready to leave and start Flyfeet, I went into one of my mentor's offices, and I was basically like, here's what I want to go do. And at the time I was an officer at Target. Like, nobody as an officer leaves Target. I mean, or at the time, nobody left. And I just laid it all out. And I was like, here's what I want to do. This is totally crazy. It's illogical. We have 3 kids, and I'm going to go start a company, and I have no idea when I'm going to like draw a salary. It doesn't make any sense. And so she looked at me and she goes, well, so if Sydney, who is my daughter, if Sydney came to you and said that, what would you say to her? And I was like, oh, I would tell her to follow her dreams. She's like, that's what you need to do. And so I think that advice of like, just bet on yourself is important, because I think as women, we spend so much time thinking about like, what's the right thing to do and what should I do? And, what's expected that I do. And it's like, we just need to bet on ourselves, because we're going to be able to figure it out. So that's number one. And number two is similar to what I was just talking about before, is like, it's so easy to say like, be yourself and be authentic. You got to do the work to figure out, like, if you really want to be yourself and be your authentic self, you got to do the work to figure out what that is. What does that actually mean to you? Like, what are your values? What is important to you? And look, for me, I had to like spend some deliberate time and really think about that. And when I am in frustrating situations, I spend time thinking about like, why is this frustrating to me? Oh, it's frustrating to me. I am not frustrated unless I am in a situation that is in conflict with my values, because everything else is just a problem we have to solve. I was never frustrated at Target Canada. Like, it was hard, but I wasn't frustrated. And so I think that is, be yourself, but put the work in to really figure out what that means for you.
Wow. I love that. I'm still kind of playing that over and over in my head. That was so good. Kristin, you are a pleasure to talk to and learn from. And, I, like we said before we got on, I didn't get a chance to work with you as closely as Alana did, but I got to admire you from afar and knew how inspiring you were, and you still are, and even more so. And so thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story with us. It's just been so great. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I love what you guys are doing. I love She Means Business. Like, this is such an incredible platform. I love your podcast. I love the women that you're highlighting. Like, thank you for doing that for all of us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for being one of them.
Yes,
Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Well, that was a blast from the past. It really was. It just all came back to me. The energy, the passion, the I call it the strong core, just her leadership. It's just so great to see Kristin.
She really is. She's exactly, talk about how she knows who she is. She's exactly who she was. Like she is just, she knows who she is and she is who she is. It's like the professional version of having it all.
Yeah. And I think obviously Kristin and I worked very closely for a year, and this notion of the values was something that I recognized from very early and learned from. And actually it was in my time at Target Canada that I really learned about what values meant. And she said something else about her values, which was about it's really the frustration comes when it's in conflict of your values.
Oh,
and I think, and I think what values are, and what I learned through this process was values it's not something you really kind of choose and say, well, I'm going to value people. I'm going to value, determination. It's really what's core to who you are. Values are what are kind of in you. And so this notion that she knows the values that she has and that are there, that allows her to pick the choices that she's making to kind of define how she leads, to define how she shows up. I just think there's something really passionate about that. And you don't need to take a course, like pay for it. There are lots of ways that you can figure out through online courses, through talking to people, through interviewing people, that you can really start to narrow down what your values are. But it's a really important thing.
I agree. And I also, for me, the way that I think about it is it's like if you're in a relationship with somebody and something doesn't feel right, and you just, that's what it is. Yes. It's that your values don't align, and you can't always put your finger on it. Eventually you do, or maybe with some time and some therapy, but it's when it doesn't feel right. Yeah. And I've had that same experience with jobs and with companies where I'm like, just something doesn't feel right here. And I can't always articulate it, and vice versa, where you're like, this just feels, I feel at home here. I feel right. And again, it's not necessarily that you can bring pets to work or you can, work from home 2 days a week. Those are not values. Those are just convenient perks.
Or things you like.
Yeah, exactly. Things that are fun. But no, I love that she said that. I mean, she's incredibly wise. I feel like you can obviously sense her energy and her passion and how driven and wise she is, and what a great leader she is. And she really is. She cares about people. She leaves her ego at the door. She's, I think, exactly what I imagine a good leader to be and what I aspire to be as a leader, and the qualities that a good leader has. And I just, I'm not surprised that she's been so successful.
Oh, no. Absolutely. And we have a choice on how we show up every day. And every leader, no matter where you are in the organization, every person has the choice to show up a certain way, to reframe what winning looks like, to reframe how they lead a team, to reframe how they recognize. And that it reminded me, just as I was listening to her, that choice that I have every day on how I show up and how I frame it for my team. But I think we all have that. And it's such an important, what it does is it puts the choice, it puts the responsibility on you to make that choice, not the external environment to bring that choice on you. It is really a choice on how you show up. So that really resonates for me, and I'm very passionate about that.
No, I think it's so true from a team perspective, and coming to work and, being motivated, and, just because the numbers are bad doesn't necessarily mean that everything's bad. And I wrote something similar when she said that the things that are the hardest are the most rewarding. I mean, that's the stuff. That's when you grow. That's the good stuff.
And that's really important to just note for yourself as you're going through it, because sometimes hard feels like, oh, can I do it? And I think it's really, no, actually do the hard. And I think her statement, I can do hard things, gets you to that other side. And then you have more confidence in your ability because you did it versus like thinking it's too hard.
Exactly. Ugh.
One last thing I wanted to touch on was mentorship, because I think this give and take very quickly. I think something I took away from that is just around this two-way street, something I hadn't really thought about as explicitly as what Kristin said. But I think something for us to take away, both as the mentor or the mentee, is what are you bringing to that relationship? How are you articulating it? How are you being your authentic self? And how do you ensure that you're there's a two-way relationship here. It's not about one way. It's about a two-way street. I love that. That was a big one for me.
I had never thought of it. I had never thought of it, but it's so true. And again, I've had a couple, people show up in a very close amount of time. One came and had nothing to offer and nothing. She wasn't challenging in any way. She wasn't, and it didn't go anywhere. And another one did. And I'm continuing to mentor her, and she's terrific. And it's fun for both of us. And
right.
And what a difference. Now I'm thinking I need to call that woman that I never called back.
I really think that's your next step out of this podcast, right? Is just
What's
to go and do it
of limitations
and report
on something like that.
I'm sure there'll be an opportunity at a later date to report back on how that conversation
and maybe
went.
Have her on the show.
Exactly.
Thanks for listening to this episode of She Means Business. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, and head over to our show notes where you can find helpful links and summaries of key points from the episode. We'd also love to hear from you on LinkedIn or Instagram, so please follow and DM us at the She Means Business podcast. See you next time.